Welcome to this deep dive. If you're listening right now, you are stepping into a very specific kind of room today.
Yeah, consider yourself part of a highly exclusive, highly focused club for the next hour.
Exactly, because we are completely bypassing the mainstream news noise, the stuff, the endless chyrons, the talking heads, just repeating the same 5 talking
It's
points.
just a wall of static.
It really is. So instead, we are granting you access to a walled garden of high signal information. And today's mission, it's driven by a stack of sources anchored by a recently intercepted triangulated open source intelligence dossier.
From an operative named Manal Mehta.
Right. And our goal here is simple, but it is ambitious. We are going to connect the dots between massive global energy shocks, the AI software apocalypse, some honestly bizarre shifts in Gen Z consumer behavior, and this is the craziest part, the absolute bleeding edge of frontier biocomputing.
It is a massive web of information, but I promise you, it is exactly what you need to understand the current reality.
Totally.
Because look, it is essential to actively tune out the static right now. We live in a world characterized by severe, almost paralyzing information overload. The true value doesn't lie in the headlines that millions of other people are reading simultaneously.
Yeah, by the time it's on the front page, the alpha is already gone.
Exactly. The real value lies in spotting the second-order effects. It's about listening for the whispers behind those headlines, tracking the institutional flow, and paying attention to the dark pool chatter that most people just completely ignore. That is precisely our focus today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because whether you are prepping for a high-stakes strategy meeting this week, maybe you're managing your own portfolio, or, I don't know, you are just insanely curious about the hidden gears turning the global economy, this briefing is designed to completely rewire how you see the market landscape.
We're going to cover a lot of ground.
We are going to jump across industries, but by the end of this hour, you will see how they all deeply connect.
Before we dive into the raw data, though, I want to offer a brief but very necessary disclaimer to you, the listener. The intelligence in this dossier spans highly charged geopolitical spheres and intensely debated domestic political environments.
Yeah, it gets heavy.
It does. We're going to examine regulatory shifts, international conflicts, highly politicized policy changes. So it's crucial to state right up front that our analysis here will remain strictly impartial. We are not endorsing any policies, nor are we taking any ideological sides.
We're just looking at the data.
We are examining this purely for its strategic, financial, and market implications. Because frankly, the market doesn't care about our personal politics, and neither does this analysis.
I think that's the perfect mindset to have going in. So let's jump right into the macro shock, because the warning lights on the global dashboard are absolutely blinking red right now.
Energy.
Energy. The immediate crisis dominating the institutional chatter is oil. We're seeing oil violently surge past $100 a barrel for the first time in 4 years.
And we need to be clear, this isn't a slow, demand-driven creep.
No, not at all. This is a sudden spike driven directly by the escalating conflict with Iran. This conflict has effectively halted commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is arguably the most critical choke point on Earth.
Right. We are talking about one of the most vulnerable choke points for global energy supplies just shutting down almost overnight. To put that in perspective for our daily lives here in the U.S., gasoline prices are up 17% since the conflict started.
Hitting an average of, what, $3.48 a gallon?
Exactly, $3.48. And the mainstream narrative is just screaming about a return to crippling inflation and catastrophic supply shocks.
What's fascinating here is what that mainstream panic entirely misses. The broader market sees a traditional, textbook oil crisis. But the triangulated reality hidden within this dossier points to something much more profound.
The violent death of European political complacency.
Yes. Let's look at the recent history there. According to intercepted analyses and FT reporting, Europe had actually been quietly backtracking on its aggressive decarbonization goals recently.
Right, in the name of protecting local competitiveness, they said?
Exactly. Politicians were slowing down the mandated phase-out of internal combustion engines. They were actively trying to carve out massive loopholes in their carbon border adjustment mechanism.
Wait, let me stop you there to make sure I'm tracking this. They were basically trying to tweak their own carbon tariffs to protect specific domestic industries. Like who?
Specifically, they were looking at creating exemptions for things like fertilizer imports.
Oh, okay.
This was to appease massive protests from local agricultural sectors. They were prioritizing the demands of short-term incumbent lobbying groups over the very difficult, very expensive work of securing long-term energy independence.
They thought they had the luxury of time to just slow walk the green transition.
And now, by relying so heavily on imported fossil fuels, while simultaneously slowing down their renewable build-out, they've run headfirst into a geopolitical wall.
The Strait of Hormuz shuts down, and suddenly that complacency looks like a massive strategic failure.
That is the crux of the issue. This price shock is the catalyst. It permanently removes the luxury of time. It forces a panicked, necessary policy pivot back toward green energy and domestic grid resilience.
And we know they can actually do it, right? Because this isn't just theoretical.
Not at all. If we look back to the crisis 4 years ago when Russian natural gas was suddenly throttled, Europe displayed incredible, largely unsung economic agility.
Right. They rapidly reduced industrial energy use, sourced alternative fuels, accelerated renewable deployments.
They proved that the capacity for a rapid transition exists when the alternative is literally freezing in the dark. This current oil surge is the second blaring alarm bell in half a decade. The political maneuvering is over. It will be answered with massive forced capital deployment.
So if I'm looking at my portfolio, the alpha here isn't just blindly buying Exxon or Chevron, which is the knee-jerk reaction everyone else on retail is having. The real alpha lies in front-running this forced, accelerated energy transition. And the dossier explicitly points us toward a few specific plays that capture this dynamic. Let's talk about Vistra, ticker VST.
A major independent power generator.
Right, and our intel shows a massive flurry of recent insider Form 4 filings. For those tracking the paperwork, that means executives and board members are actively buying up their own stock with their own personal money.
Insider buying of that magnitude during a macro crisis is a massive, massive signal. Vistra operates a highly diversified fleet of power generation, which includes nuclear and natural gas.
So in a world where global supply chains are fracturing, a company that provides localized domestic grid stability becomes strategically vital.
They aren't reliant on a tanker making it through contested strait in the Middle East to keep the lights on in Texas or the Midwest. Baseline energy security is a premium asset.
That makes total sense. But the dossier also points to a totally different angle on this energy shock: agriculture.
Specifically CF Industries, ticker CF.
Yeah, how does a fertilizer company fit into an oil and gas crisis?
CF Industries is a brilliant example of second-order thinking, which is exactly what we are always looking for. You have to understand how fertilizer is actually made.
Okay.
Soaring natural gas prices don't just make it expensive to heat a factory. Natural gas is the literal chemical feedstock used to produce ammonia-based fertilizers, is the primary input cost.
Oh, wow.
So the spiking energy prices are absolutely going to crush European fertilizer producers who rely heavily on imported gas. Remember those European politicians trying to create tariff carve-outs for fertilizer to appease their farmers?
Right, because their local farmers are getting squeezed.
Exactly. This geopolitical crisis amplifies that squeeze immensely. European fertilizer production will likely face severe curtailments because it simply becomes too expensive to operate the plants.
This is where U.S.-based CF Industries comes in.
Yes, they have access to abundant, relatively cheap domestic U.S. natural gas. They are perfectly positioned to export their fertilizer into a high-priced, politically protected European market that is suddenly starved of local supply.
So they benefit directly from the structural supply constraints across the Atlantic.
While playing a critical role in maintaining global food security, yes, and capturing massive margin expansion in the process.
That is a phenomenal connection. Energy security isn't just about keeping the lights on, it's about keeping the food supply stable. Let's zoom out from Europe, though, and look at the actual superpowers involved here, because this conflict is exposing some massive structural vulnerabilities. Look at China.
The dossier highlights a staggering figure here.
Yeah, China has invested $89 billion in the Middle East over the last 5 years alone. Furthermore, more than half of their seaborne crude oil comes directly from that region.
With the Strait of Hormuz virtually halted, their energy security and the physical transport of their raw materials are in the direct line of fire.
It is a massive compounding headwind for the Chinese economy. They've spent years attempting to build out the Belt and Road Initiative, but their reliance on maritime choke points remains their Achilles heel.
When the ships can't move, their industrial base starves.
And I want to contrast that massive vulnerability with what the United States is quietly doing defensively. The intelligence points to a historic shift occurring right now with something called Project Volt.
The current administration is fundamentally transforming the Export-Import Bank.
Right. Now, normally, the Ex-Im Bank exists to help finance U.S. exports. Like, if a foreign airline wants to buy Boeing jets, the Ex-Im Bank might help guarantee the financing. But they are shifting gears entirely.
Backing Project Vault with a historic $10 billion loan.
And that $10 billion is not for exporting American goods.
No, it is being used to stockpile 60 essential raw materials right here in the U.S.
$10 billion to hoard materials. What kind of materials are we talking about?
We are talking about critical inputs for the modern industrial and technological base. Materials essential for companies like General Motors building EVs, Boeing manufacturing aerospace components, and Google expanding data center infrastructure.
Okay, so like rare earth elements.
Rare earth elements, cobalt, advanced lithium derivatives, specialized semiconductor precursor gases. The Ex-Im Bank is fundamentally shifting its mandate to finance imports.
Wow.
It is acting as an instrument of aggressive industrial policy to de-risk American supply chains against Chinese dominance in critical mineral refining.
But wait, doesn't that just mean we are still reliant on foreign supply chains? We're just buying them up faster? How is that a long-term fix?
It's not a permanent fix, it's a strategic buffer.
Yeah.
By stockpiling these 60 essential materials, the U.S. is essentially buying time to build out its own domestic refining and processing capabilities.
Which currently lag decades behind China.
Exactly. Project Vault formally enters the U.S. into a mineral security arms race. It acknowledges that the free trade assumptions of the past 30 years are dead, and state-backed supply chain resilience is the new paradigm.
I really want you, the listener, to think about that for a second. Energy security and raw material supply have completely merged with national security. It's no longer just an economic policy debate. It's affecting everything from the architecture of global supply chains to the price of your morning commute, and it is actively reshaping the entire purpose of federal banking institutions.
Which transitions us perfectly to another massive structural shift.
Yes.
Because while the physical world is grappling with these supply chain shocks, the digital world is undergoing a violent metamorphosis of its own. We need to look closely at the rapidly evolving landscape of AI and enterprise software.
Oh, this is a huge one. If you follow tech at all, the mainstream narrative right now is calling it the SaaS apocalypse.
Software as a service.
Right. For years, the greatest business model in the world was SaaS. You build a platform and you charge companies a monthly fee for every single employee, every seat that uses it.
But enterprise software is facing a massive adapt or die moment.
Because of the rise of agentic AI.
We need to define what that actually means, because we are not just talking about customer service chatbots anymore.
No, not at all.
Agentic AI refers to artificial intelligence that acts as an intelligent, autonomous interface sitting between human workers and legacy software systems. If an AI agent can reason, make independent decisions, and execute complex, multi-step tasks across different software applications without human intervention.
It effectively bypasses the human worker entirely.
Precisely.
And if the human worker is bypassed, the company doesn't need to pay for their software seat anymore. It threatens the core per-seat subscription model that the entire multi-trillion-dollar software industry is built on. I mean, why pay for 1,000 Salesforce licenses if you only need 50 humans managing a swarm of AI sales agents?
The market's reaction to this realization has been incredibly chaotic and indiscriminate. Over the past few quarters, we've seen panic selling across broad-based SaaS stocks.
Just dumping everything.
Investors are fleeing the sector, assuming that AI will commoditize all software. But as macro analyst Raoul Pal points out in our source materials, this panic is a gross overreaction that fundamentally misunderstands the math of AI progress.
Yes, the dossier specifically references his concept of super exponential AI progress. Now, I'm just a guy who reads a lot, so you need to break this down for me. The notes say it's Reed's law meets Metcalfe's law squared. What does that actually mean in plain English?
Let's translate that. Metcalfe's law essentially says that the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of its users.
Like the early telephone system.
Exactly. One phone is useless, 2 phones are okay, 1,000,000 phones change the world. Reed's law takes it a step further, stating that the utility of large networks can scale exponentially with the size of the network, particularly when users can form distinct subgroups or communities.
Like subreddits or specialized Slack channels.
Precisely. Now, apply that to AI agents. We aren't just connecting humans anymore. We are connecting AI models that can form specialized subnetworks to solve complex problems autonomously at the speed of compute.
Wow.
When Powell says it's super exponential, he means the rate of capability improvement is compounding so fast that human intuition, frankly, fails to grasp it. A task that takes a human 10 hours today might be handled by an AI in 10 minutes by 2026.
This means the bifurcation of the software industry, separating the AI winners from the legacy losers, will happen in a matter of quarters, not years.
Yes, which brings us to a brilliant, mind-bending contradiction we found in the dossier regarding a very familiar company.
Angie, ticker ANGI.
You probably know them as Angie's List, the home repair marketplace.
Right, the Wall Street analysts are totally split on this stock, and it perfectly illustrates the AI confusion. One side is screaming, short ANGI.
And their logic makes total sense on the surface.
It really does. Angie's core business is acting as a lead generation broker for human skilled labor, plumbers, electricians, contractors. If AI progress is super exponential, by 2026, an AI-native platform could easily diagnose your leaky pipe via your phone's camera, order the exact replacement part via drone, and guide you through the fix yourself with an augmented reality overlay.
And if that happens, the value of a human middleman and the platform that connects you to them plummets to zero.
It is a very compelling bear thesis.
It is. But this raises an important question. How do we properly evaluate a company's moat in the age of generative AI? Because the contrarian view in the dossier argues the exact opposite. It says to long NGI.
Okay, sum me on the bull case. How does a legacy lead gen site survive that?
Because Angie isn't just sitting still waiting to be disrupted. They recently launched a deep integration directly within the ChatGPT application. By embedding themselves into the native workflow of the world's most popular AI, they are fundamentally altering their business model,
So they are utilizing the AI to fix their own core matching and pricing engine.
which historically has been clunky and inefficient. They are transitioning from a declining legacy directory model into an AI-native home management concierge. If successful, they aren't replaced by AI. They become the physical fulfillment arm of the AI.
Oh, that unlocks a massive new growth curve that the short sellers are completely ignoring.
It's the ultimate pivot. It's the difference between being replaced by the new technology and aggressively adopting the new technology to fix your biggest flaws.
And the broader takeaway here for your portfolio is understanding the difference between two types of software: systems of record versus systems of orchestration.
Systems of record being software that essentially just acts as a highly expensive digital filing cabinet holding static data.
Those are dead. AI can pull data from anywhere.
But systems of orchestration platforms that have deep integrations into a company's daily operations, possess proprietary data sets, and actively use AI to automate complex business outcomes, these are the deep value plays.
The dossier specifically flags Salesforce, Snowflake, and Palantir as prime candidates for this AI-native paradigm, noting that all three have seen significant recent insider buying.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the impact this intelligent orchestration layer has on consumer visibility and marketing. If you run a business, this next statistic should keep you up at night.
I know the one you're talking about.
Our intelligence networks report that AI agents and recommendation engines are currently routing 87% of brands out of consumer purchase decisions.
Wait, let me repeat that. 87%. That means almost 9 out of 10 brands aren't even being considered by the end consumer.
Yes. Think about how a consumer uses an AI shopping assistant. They don't scroll through pages of search results anymore.
Right, they ask the AI to find the best waterproof hiking boot under $100.
And the AI synthesizes reviews, checks inventory, and provides the top 3 options. When an AI makes that final, curated purchase recommendation, traditional brand loyalty is entirely bypassed. Search engine optimization, the SEO industry that digital marketing has relied on for 2 decades, is dying.
So what replaces it? How does a brand survive if traditional Google search is dead?
The new frontier is called Generative Engine Optimization, or GEO.
GEO.
It is an entirely different discipline focused on ensuring your product's data, reviews, and specifications are structured in a way that large language models ingest and favor. The intelligence shows that traffic generated through GEO carries a 2 times conversion premium over traditional search traffic.
Because it is highly intentional.
But the stark reality is this. If your company, your product, or even your personal brand is not visible and favored by these AI recommendation engines, You effectively cease to exist in the future digital economy.
That is terrifying and exhilarating all at once. It's a total reset of the digital playing field. But here is the physical catch to all this digital hyper-evolution.
Infrastructure.
Exactly. To run all this super exponential AI, to power millions of AI agents making shopping decisions and fixing leaky pipes, we need massive, unprecedented amounts of physical infrastructure. And right now, AI is slamming headfirst into the hard constraints of physical reality.
The dossier heavily highlights the critical physical bottlenecks occurring inside data centers right now. And it's not just about getting your hands on enough NVIDIA chips anymore.
The chips are only part of the equation.
As the capability of these AI models scales exponentially, the compute power required per server rack is skyrocketing. A few years ago, a dense server rack might draw 10 to 15 kilowatts of power.
And today?
Today, advanced AI clusters are pushing 50 to 100 kilowatts per rack. At that density, traditional air cooling blowing massive amounts of chilled air through the servers fundamentally fails. The thermodynamics simply don't work.
So liquid cooling is no longer an exotic luxury for supercomputers.
It is a non-negotiable enabling technology for the entire AI industry.
And the market is starting to price that physical reality in. We see this with KKR, the massive private equity firm, reportedly exploring a $3 billion sale of a company called Coolite Systems.
They specialize in advanced liquid cooling solutions for data centers.
Right. The physical constraints of localized power generation and highly specialized real estate are the ultimate limiting factors for AI. You can write all the code you want, but if you can't power and cool the servers, it just doesn't matter.
Which makes specialized data center real estate investment trusts, or REITs, like Digital Realty and Equinix, absolutely critical long-term assets.
Tickers DLR and EQIX.
The intelligence suggests that despite their recent runs, the broader market is still modeling linear growth for these companies based on historical cloud computing trends.
They are completely missing the super exponential physical requirements of the AI build-out. The demand for a retrofitted, liquid-cooled, high-density data center space will vastly outstrip supply for the foreseeable future.
And if you think liquid cooling the servers is wild, wait until we talk about the absolute frontier of computing from our private venture radar.
Oh man, this part of the dossier is wild because while companies are struggling to cool silicon chips, a handful of researchers are trying to move beyond silicon entirely.
Wetware computing.
Yes, we are tracking a company called Cortical Labs. And I need you to brace yourself for this. They are integrating living, biological human neurons with traditional computer hardware.
It sounds like science fiction.
It really does.
But it is a rapidly advancing field. Cortical Labs has successfully created what they call dish brain, a neural network composed of hundreds of thousands of living brain cells cultivated in a lab and integrated with a silicon interface.
And they've actually started shipping a product called the CL1. It is a biological computer available for research purchase that has demonstrated the ability to learn and run the classic video game Doom.
Living human brain cells in a petri dish playing Doom.
I mean, why? What is the practical application of this other than sounding incredibly dystopian?
The core thesis is energy efficiency and adaptable learning.
Okay.
The human brain is arguably the most powerful supercomputer in existence, and it operates on roughly 20 watts of power.
Less than a standard light bulb.
Exactly. Compare that to the hundreds of megawatts required to train a large language model. Cortical Labs believes that by harnessing the innate biological efficiency of neurons, they could eventually create AI systems that learn significantly faster, require vastly less training data, and use a fraction of the energy of current silicon-based models.
It is a radical attempt to solve the very power bottlenecks we just discussed.
And alongside that, the dossier details another massive breakthrough from a company called Eon Systems. They aren't putting living neurons on a chip. They are going the other direction.
They have successfully uploaded and simulated a fruit fly's complete brain connectome in a digital environment.
We're talking about mapping and digitally simulating roughly 125,000 individual neurons and over 50 million synaptic connections.
And it isn't just a static map. The simulation produces multi-behavioral outputs. It actually simulates the fly's decision-making process. But why does mapping a fruit fly matter to the global economy?
Because it is a foundational, irrefutable proof of concept for artificial general intelligence. If you can perfectly map and simulate the consciousness and behavioral outputs of a biological organism in a digital space, it ceases to be a question of if we can do it for more complex mammals.
It's simply a question of computational scale.
They are actively bridging the gap between theoretical neuroscience and practical, manipulatable digital consciousness.
From living neurons playing Doom to uploaded fruit fly brains, it really feels like we are living in the prologue of a cyberpunk novel.
It does.
But here is the incredible paradox. While all this digital hyper-evolution is happening, while we are literally digitizing biology, the most digitally native generation of humans on Earth is doing something totally unexpected. Let's pivot and look at the demographic paradoxes we found in the intel.
The consumer statistics emerging from this demographic are deeply counterintuitive to the prevailing narratives.
Gen Z shoppers, specifically the cohort aged 18 to 24, made an astonishing 62% of their general merchandise purchases in physical stores last year.
Wait, I need to emphasize that. 62%.
That is a higher rate of physical in-store shopping than older cohorts like millennials and even Gen X, who actually grew up going to the mall. The kids who were born with an iPad in their hands are actively resurrecting the physical shopping mall.
It is a profound behavioral shift. For a decade, the dominant financial narrative was the death of the mall, killed by the inevitable, unstoppable rise of e-commerce and Amazon.
But Gen Z is treating the physical mall entirely differently than previous generations did.
We have to consider the psychological context here. This is a generation that spent their most formative, socially critical years locked down during a global pandemic. They were forced to exist entirely in digital spaces.
So for them, physical retail isn't an archaic chore, it is a novelty, it is a destination.
And it's not just about going to a store to buy a plain white t-shirt. They aren't just browsing department store racks.
No, the mall has become a physical backdrop for their digital lives. It's about content creation.
Precisely. Forward-thinking retailers realize that the physical experience is now a critical competitive moat. It isn't about nostalgia for the 1990s. It's about generating social currency today.
The Dossier details a brilliant case study on this, an event at the Tysons Corner Center Mall featuring the formerly online-only fashion brand, Addicted.
They didn't just quietly open a brick-and-mortar store. They hosted a massive Valentine's Day event. They offered free artisanal matcha lattes. They hired brand ambassadors recruited directly from local college campuses.
And most importantly, they architected specific, highly aesthetic nooks within the store designed explicitly for taking photos and filming TikToks.
They built a movie set that happens to sell clothes.
Exactly. They are monetizing the physical space as a high-touch experience hub. The transaction of buying the clothing is almost secondary to the experience of generating content within the branded environment.
So from an investment perspective, the trade here is to aggressively ignore the blanket death of the mall narrative.
Dead, decaying C-class malls in the middle of nowhere are still dying.
But Class A, experience-driven destination malls are thriving.
The dossier points us toward high-end mall real estate investment trusts like Simon Property Group, ticker SPG, which has seen notable insider buying recently. It also highlights the specific retailers that have mastered this store as a stage in-store experience. Brands like Lululemon and Tapestry's Coach brand.
They know exactly how to court this specific demographic by making the physical visit feel like an exclusive event.
And what's crucial to understand is that we see this exact same consumer psychology, this intense desire for tangible, status signaling, high-touch physical experiences, playing out in entirely different sectors. Look at the pet industry.
The concept of pet wellness is exploding into a massive economic force. We're seeing data showing people spending up to $1,000 on a single dog grooming session.
Okay, I have a dog and I love him, but $1,000 for a haircut for a dog. That sounds like late-stage economic delusion. Who is paying for that?
It sounds absurd until you understand the underlying shift in how pets are viewed. It is no longer just grooming. It is viewed and marketed as preventative health care.
Okay.
It involves microbubble baths, specialized skin treatments, and dietary consultations. The intense humanization of pets is intersecting directly with the broader human wellness and longevity trends.
Pets are increasingly viewed as surrogate children by younger demographics who are delaying traditional parenthood.
Therefore, spending on the pet becomes a form of highly inelastic consumer spending. You might cut back on streaming services, but you won't compromise your dog's health.
And that completely changes the financial modeling for the industry. It dramatically expands the total addressable market for companies positioned in this space. Take Chewy, ticker CHWY, for example.
While Chewy obviously doesn't physically groom your dog, they are the primary digital platform perfectly positioned to capture this premium recurring spending.
on longevity-focused foods, specialized supplements, and veterinary telehealth. They are the infrastructure for this premiumization trend.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I want to connect these dots.
Do it.
Think about this massive cultural paradox. The generation born with smartphones in their hands, the kids who live on TikTok,
Yeah.
are craving the tactile, physical, real world more than anyone else.
They want the physical mall aesthetic. They want the premium, hands-on physical care for their pets.
Meanwhile, older generations, the boomers and Gen X, are perfectly happy ordering their groceries on an app, buying everything on Amazon, and never leaving the house. The digital natives want the physical world, and the physical natives are retreating into the digital world.
It is a profound generational behavioral inversion, and it has massive implications for how consumer capital will be allocated over the next decade. But capital allocation isn't just driven by consumer trends. It is also currently being heavily dictated by a very sudden, very sharp shift in geopolitical and regulatory realities.
Which brings us to the next section of the dossier's intelligence.
Yes, the intelligence chatter intercepted from the Middle East is fascinating and highly actionable. We mentioned the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz earlier, but the secondary effects are just as critical. Our sources have flagged highly unusual activity at Muscat International Airport in Oman.
Reports indicate that private jet flights are actively being limited and waitlisted.
And we have to ask why. It is because there is a sudden, massive surge in demand from ultra-high net worth individuals, corporate executives, and institutional capital managers who are actively trying to flee the Persian Gulf.
Due to the escalating conflict with Iran, they are chartering anything that can fly to get out of the immediate blast radius.
This represents significant capital and talent flight from financial hubs like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Historically, especially over the last 20 years, those cities have been viewed as impregnable regional safe havens.
But if this conflict persists, or God forbid expands, we could see a long-term structural erosion of the Gulf's status in global finance.
That wealth and operational talent will inevitably transfer back to traditional safe havens like Switzerland, Singapore, or London.
And this Middle East tension is directly impacting American assets in ways that are completely invisible if you only look at surface-level financial statements.
The dossier flags a specific situation with Madison Square Garden Sports, ticker MSGS, the holding company that owns the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers.
I know this story. On paper, these teams are incredibly, almost laughably undervalued by the public markets.
Right. The sports valuation group Sportico values the Knicks alone at almost $10 billion and the Rangers at nearly $4 billion. But MSGS's total enterprise value as a publicly traded company is only hovering around $8.6 billion.
It's trading at a massive discount to the underlying assets. Wall Street analysts refer to this as the Dolan discount, named after the controlling family.
The discount exists because of a notoriously tangled web of related party transactions between James Dolan's various public entities, MSG Sports, MSG Entertainment, Sphere Entertainment, and AMC Networks.
Essentially, MSG Sports subsidizes these other, less profitable entities through highly unfavorable stadium rent agreements and slashed local media rights fees.
The classic value investor thesis for years has been that eventually pressure will force a spin-off or a clean sale of the teams, unlocking billions of dollars in trapped value.
But here is where the geopolitics completely wreck that classic value thesis. A proposed spin-off to unlock that value is suddenly incredibly risky right now.
Why?
Because the Knicks' primary jersey sponsor is Experience Abu Dhabi. Furthermore, Abu Dhabi's Department of Culture and Tourism has deep integrated marketing agreements with MSG Entertainment.
And crucially, they're heavily funding the construction of a second massive Sphere venue in the UAE.
Precisely. The controlling family is deeply financially intertwined with state-backed entities in the Gulf. If the conflict in the region escalates, or if there is massive capital flight, those sponsorships and funding agreements become highly volatile.
Suddenly, this classic textbook sum of the parts value play is injected with massive immediate geopolitical risk. The catalyst for value unlock is paralyzed by a conflict half a world away.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means corporate strategy and investment analysis must now deeply, fundamentally incorporate political risk analysis. You cannot just look at a balance sheet anymore.
This is true internationally, but as the dossier points out, it is equally true domestically here in the U.S. The regulatory landscape is currently undergoing a radical, highly politicized transformation under the new Federal Trade Commission.
And as we stated in our opening disclaimer, We must look at this purely through an analytical strategic lens.
Right.
The Wall Street Journal and our internal sources report that the new FTC chair, Andrew Ferguson, has closely and unapologetically aligned the agency's enforcement actions with the new administration's broader political and cultural agenda.
This is a significant departure from traditional, strictly economics-based antitrust enforcement. Ferguson's FTC is pursuing completely novel legal theories.
While the agency has actually taken a much more conciliatory, pro-business stance on traditional corporate mergers, provided those mergers don't conflict with their populist goals, they are aggressively weaponizing the agency's investigative powers against highly politicized cultural targets.
We are seeing unprecedented probes. The FTC is currently looking into corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, investigating how health insurance handles transgender healthcare, and aggressively pursuing alleged media censorship.
For example, they recently sent formal warning letters and document privation requests to Apple, investigating whether the Apple News app algorithmically suppresses conservative media outlets.
But at the same time, they aren't totally abandoning traditional consumer protection. They are just targeting it at issues that resonate loudly with their voter base. They are hyper-focused on affordability issues like grocery prices and corporate housing landlords.
And they are landing massive, headline-grabbing financial blows. They just recently secured a staggering $2.5 billion settlement with Amazon regarding alleged deceptive pricing.
And a $100 million settlement with Walmart over driver pay transparency.
The strategic, actionable takeaway for our listeners here is that the domestic regulatory environment is now highly dependent on perceived political alignment.
Sectors vulnerable to populist affordability, critiques like national grocery chains, massive housing developers, or energy utilities face heightened, unpredictable scrutiny.
Tech companies with active content moderation policies face a highly mobilized, culturally motivated FTC.
M&A arbitrage is no longer just a math equation about antitrust economics and market share. It requires a complex, nuanced political calculus to determine if a deal will trigger a cultural backlash from the regulators.
It is an absolute minefield out there for corporate legal teams. Let's shift gears entirely to something that feels a bit more optimistic but is equally revolutionary in its scope.
I want to talk about the frontier science and biopharma breakthroughs detailed in the Intel. We talked earlier about AI needing physical data center infrastructure, but AI is also fundamentally changing how we do hard science.
The intelligence emphasizes that high-fidelity biological data generation is the new oil for the biotech industry.
That is an apt comparison. The multi-trillion-dollar global quest to solve devastating conditions like brain aging, Alzheimer's, and severe mental health disorders relies entirely on massive volumes of high-fidelity genomic and cellular data.
You cannot train an AI to find a cure if you don't have the raw data to feed it.
The dossier points to Illumina, ticker ILMN, as a massive structural beneficiary of this shift. As AI inevitably accelerates the pace of biotech research and development, the primary bottleneck isn't computing power. It becomes the raw genomic data generation. Illumina dominates the sequencing market that produces that data.
Let's get into the specifics, what the dossier calls the killer experiments, because the hard science here is absolutely mind-blowing. Let's start with the brain mapping.
Researchers have recently published a high-resolution multimodal single-cell atlas of the developing adolescent brain.
They managed to identify 36 specific enhancer-driven gene regulatory networks.
The acronym the Intel uses is small e, big GRNS, EGRNs. Now, I have to be honest, I read that and my eyes completely glazed over. What is an EGRN, and why do I care?
Think of the DNA in your cells as a massive library of blueprints. The genes are the blueprints for building proteins.
Okay, blueprints for proteins, got it.
But you don't want every blueprint being built all the time in every cell. You need a management system. The enhancer-driven gene regulatory networks, the EGRNs, are like the master circuit breakers in a house, or the complex project managers.
They dictate exactly when, where, and how strongly specific genes are turned on or off.
Okay, that makes sense. So they found 36 of these master circuit breakers in the adolescent brain that change as a teenager grows up.
Yes. And what makes this discovery critical for human health is that these specific regulatory elements, these 36 circuit breakers, colocalize with genetic variants linked to severe neurodevelopmental disorders like schizophrenia,
as well as later in life neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's.
Essentially, they found the exact biological control boards where the wiring goes wrong during puberty, setting the stage for mental illness years later.
So what is the actionable experiment the intelligence analysts are proposing based on this? They aren't just reading the paper, they are proposing a commercial application.
They want to use massive AI foundation models to simulate genetic risk variance within these specific networks.
They want to digitally predict the cascade of changes in the brain's wiring and then physically validate those predictions using CRISPR gene editing on lab-grown adolescent brain organoids.
It shifts the entire paradigm of psychiatric medicine. Currently, we look at static genetic risk scores. You either have the gene for a disease or you don't, and then we wait for symptoms to appear before prescribing blunt force medications.
This new approach creates a functional dynamic map of molecular fragility.
We could theoretically screen a teenager's genetic profile, simulate how their EGRN circuit breakers will operate over the next 5 years, and identify preventative, highly targeted therapeutics to stabilize those brain networks before the first symptoms of schizophrenia ever manifest.
Preventing the disease before the symptoms start by fixing the regulatory software of the brain. The Dossier flags computational drug discovery companies like Recursion Pharmaceuticals, ticker RXRX, and Relay Therapeutics, ticker RLAY, as the pioneers equipped for this specific kind of AI-driven biological simulation space.
And the research emerging on the aging brain is equally profound, moving beyond just genetics into how the brain physically processes information.
A fascinating new study on visual scene processing demonstrates that as we age, our brains fundamentally change how they perceive the world.
Older adults rely much more heavily on top-down prior knowledge and context rather than bottom-up raw sensory input.
So it's kind of like autocorrect on your phone.
Exactly. As the brain gets older, instead of spending the energy to look closely at every single detail of a room, it just uses its decades of memories to predict what should be in the room and fills in the blanks.
That is an excellent analogy. It relies on predictive models to save cognitive energy. Concurrently, another breakthrough paper discovered that the brain manages complex, focused tasks using what they call overarching neural programs.
Think of this like your computer's RAM. When you switch from writing an email to playing a video game, your computer executes a massive reset, clearing the memory to load the new program.
The brain does something similar. It executes massive synchronized resets of neural activity across the entire cortex to frame a new episode of focused cognition.
So if you combine those two insights, the predictive autocorrect and the overarching neural resets, the theory the analysts are proposing is that age-related cognitive decline, the brain fog we associate with getting older, might actually be a physical failure of these episode programs to instantiate properly.
The brain forgets how to clear the RAM effectively.
Precisely. And the proposed alpha unlock here is wild, representing an entirely new therapeutic modality.
The experiment involves testing older adults with high-density EEGs to identify their specific weakened neural signatures when trying to focus. Once identified, doctors would use precisely timed, non-invasive brain stimulation techniques like transcranial alternating current stimulation to literally prime the brain's operating system.
You are talking about wearing a headset that beams a highly specific electrical rhythm into your skull to force your brain's RAM to clear out and boot up the focus program.
Yes, we are moving entirely beyond just treating the symptoms of aging with chemical pharmacology and pills. We are looking at precision electrical neuromodulation to restore efficient cognitive control.
It aims to restore the brain's physical ability to switch states. It's a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity that disrupts traditional pharma, pointing toward major neurological players like Biogen and Eli Lilly who are actively exploring these adjacencies.
I cannot get over the idea of electronically priming the brain's operating system. It sounds like patching software on a laptop.
But it's not just human biology making these massive leaps. The Dossier details a massive leap in industrial bioproduction involving something called synthetic yeast.
Yes, industrial fermentation is a massive hidden sector of the economy. Researchers have recently identified and isolated a specific cellular mechanism called the sporulate endereplicate mate cycle, or the SEM cycle, in budding yeast.
Okay, translation time again. What does that mean?
It's about ploidy, which refers to the number of sets of chromosomes in a cell. Humans are diploid. We have 2 sets. This SEM cycle allows a single yeast spore to incrementally, stably double its entire genome.
It transitions from a diploid with 2 sets to a triploid with 3 sets and then a tetraploid with 4 sets without losing its structural integrity or its ability to mate and reproduce.
Why does manipulating the chromosome count of yeast matter to investors?
Because yeast is the workhorse of industrial biology. Imagine a yeast cell as a microscopic factory, and its DNA is the blueprint for the assembly line.
If you have a yeast strain engineered to produce a high-value chemical, let's say a rare fragrance precursor for the perfume industry, or an advanced biofuel, it has one assembly line.
If you force that yeast through this SEM cycle to become a tetraploid, you have fundamentally given the cell 4 identical sets of blueprints.
So it runs 4 assembly lines simultaneously inside the same cell.
Exactly. You can consistently and massively boost the production yields of the target chemical. It is a fundamental platform-agnostic technology.
It is vastly faster and cheaper than the traditional painstaking process of iteratively editing single genes to try and boost efficiency.
Companies that specialize in organism engineering, like Ginkgo's Bioworks, ticker DNA, and advanced biofuel producers like Gevo, ticker GEVO, could heavily utilize this SEM cycle for a massive sustainable cost of goods advantage over traditional chemical manufacturing.
That is the definition of a hidden catalyst. I'm going to quickly run through the clinical trial intelligence the dossier flagged because there's incredible momentum across the board in traditional biotech right now.
Xenon Pharmaceuticals posted incredibly strong phase 3 data for their new epilepsy drug, azetukalner.
That is a significant breakthrough. It is a novel potassium channel modulator. Instead of broadly dampening brain activity like older anti-seizure meds, it specifically targets and stabilizes the neuronal resting potential.
It offers incredibly high efficacy in preventing seizures with significantly fewer debilitating side effects for the patient.
We also see AbbVie with successful phase 3 results for a new subcutaneous induction formulation of Skyray-Z for Crohn's disease.
That is a huge quality of life upgrade, allowing patients to administer the drug at home via an injection rather than sitting in a clinic for hours getting an IV infusion.
And finally, Pfizer announced positive phase 2 results for a truly first-in-class medicine that simultaneously targets 3 distinct drivers of inflammation at once.
That Pfizer trial is a potential paradigm shift for complex autoimmune diseases. Current biologics usually target one specific inflammatory pathway.
By successfully targeting 3 simultaneously without catastrophic toxicity, they are opening the door to treating highly complex multi-system inflammatory diseases that currently fail standard therapies.
Just incredible momentum across the entire healthcare spectrum. But let's bring it back to consumer behavior and retail markets for our final section today: the prediction economy and the entertainment shifts.
If you have been paying attention to the internet lately, you've probably noticed how prediction markets are suddenly absolutely everywhere.
It is a significant cultural and financial shift. Platforms where users can bet real money on the outcome of future events are moving from the fringes of crypto into the mainstream.
The platform Kalshi is a prime example. They're aggressively trying to diversify their user base away from the traditional male-dominated sports betting demographic.
They are intentionally targeting women with highly specific pop culture wagers.
Yes. The dossier notes some of the specific markets they opened. They were taking massive amounts of bets on whether Taylor Swift would say the word ring during a specific televised interview.
They are hosting sponsored watch parties for The Bachelorette, where attendees can bet in real time on who gets a rose. They are actively trying to gamify everyday pop culture.
The underlying corporate strategy here is fundamentally about regulatory de-risking and expanding the total addressable market.
By rebranding themselves as a broader information market or a cultural stock exchange rather than a traditional sports book or casino, they hope to avoid the highly restrictive state-by-state gambling laws that throttle companies like DraftKings.
It's about channeling the wisdom of crowds across a much wider demographic.
Yeah.
But here's the critical insight from the intelligence. The ultimate financial beneficiary of this mainstreaming of speculative retail trading might not actually be Kalshi itself.
Right, the alpha points a level deeper to the infrastructure layer. The dossier points to Coinbase, ticker COIN.
As these gamified prediction platforms onboard millions of new, younger retail users into the mechanics of speculative trading, those users will inevitably be cross-sold into broader crypto ecosystems.
Coinbase acts as the premier, highly regulated, publicly traded on-ramp for this massive wave of retail speculation. They are the toll booth on the highway.
And the level of speculation happening right now is intense and highly detailed. The dossier cites specific odds from Polymarket, the largest rival prediction platform.
Currently, the crowd believes there is only a 16% chance that MicroStrategy, the software company that operates as a proxy for Bitcoin, sells any of its massive Bitcoin reserves by the end of 2026.
Furthermore, they price the odds of the crypto exchange Kraken going public via an IPO at less than 7% by Q1 of 2026.
The crowd is no longer just betting on sports. They are assigning highly specific, real-time probabilities to major corporate events and treasury strategies.
Speaking of major corporate events and public perception, let's talk about the entertainment sector. The Dossier has some fascinating contrarian intel on Disney.
Pixar, which is owned by Disney, just had a supposedly massive opening weekend for their brand new original animated movie, Hoppers. The box office receipts pulled in an estimated $88 million globally.
The mainstream entertainment press is falling over themselves, calling it a huge win, declaring it the biggest original animated debut since 2017.
But again, our job is to look at the triangulated reality, not the PR spin. The dossier signals a definitive short thesis on Disney based on these exact numbers.
Why? Because you have to look at the historical context of the studio. Despite being lauded as a win, an $88 million global opening still dramatically underperforms past Pixar original hits.
A movie like Inside Out opened to over $90 million domestically alone, and that was years ago, back when ticket prices were significantly cheaper.
So adjusted for inflation, it's actually a massive miss compared to their historical average. It's the franchise decay thesis.
The market is so desperate for any sign of life, any win from Disney's struggling creative pipeline, that the stock will temporarily rally on objectively mediocre news.
But Hoppers making $88 million doesn't prove a grand creative turnaround. It proves that the absolute ceiling for Disney's original IP has fundamentally lowered.
The intelligence suggests fading any stock strength that comes from this headline.
Finally, to wrap up the specific market intelligence, we have an excellent example of classic, ruthless textbook value investing operating in a high inflation environment.
The activist investor group Starboard Value has aggressively built a sizable stake in Lamb Weston, the massive global French fry producer.
French fries. I love the whiplash of this deep dive. We go from uploading fruit fly brains into the metaverse to optimizing the supply chain of potato processing.
It perfectly highlights how diverse true alpha generation can be if you know what to look for. Lamb Weston is an underperforming stock operating in a highly consolidated, unglamorous commodity industry.
Starboard is stepping in and aggressively demanding that management double their current cost savings targets and potentially sell off their entire Asia-Pacific business unit to streamline operations.
Why now? Why are they targeting a potato company?
Because in an environment of structurally high energy and input costs, which we discussed at length in Section 1 regarding the macro energy shock revenue growth, is incredibly difficult.
Therefore, forcing ruthless, uncompromising operational efficiency and margin expansion on a baseline commodity producer is a proven, reliable path to generating shareholder value.
It is a classic event-driven special situation, a structural shakeup that the broader tech-obsessed market is currently discounting or ignoring entirely.
Okay, take a breath. We have covered a truly staggering amount of ground today, from the Strait of Hormuz to synthetic yeast ploidy. So, what does this all mean? How do we tie a bow on this intelligence dossier?
If we synthesize this entire briefing, we are observing a simultaneous structural rewiring of the global economy's most fundamental systems.
We are seeing a forced, panicked transition in how the world generates and secures energy.
We are seeing the fundamental disintermediation of traditional enterprise software by autonomous AI agents.
We are seeing a complete, bizarre paradox in consumer habits, where the digital generation desperately seeks physical refuge in malls and pet care.
And we are seeing unparalleled, sci-fi level leaps in our ability to map, manipulate, and digitally simulate the literal human brain. Across all these disparate sectors, the winners in this new paradigm share one trait. They are the orchestrators.
The orchestrators. I really like that framing.
Yes. The companies that survive aren't just holding static data. They are orchestrating AI to create autonomous outcomes, like Palantir or Angie.
The retail operators that win aren't just selling clothes on a rack. They are orchestrating a physical, highly tactile, socially monetizable experience, like Addicted.
The biotechs that dominate aren't just blindly sequencing genes. They are orchestrating precision neuromodulation and simulating cellular networks.
Across the board, the economic value has permanently shifted from the underlying commodity, whether that commodity is a software subscription seat, a retail transaction, or a basic genetic test, to the intelligent layer that actively orchestrates it.
That is a brilliant synthesis of the data.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly philosophical, provocative thought that connects these seemingly opposite threads. We talked extensively about Gen Z. The generation that grew up entirely online is actively fleeing the digital world, flocking to physical, tactile malls, and paying premium, absurd prices for physical pet care because they desperately want to feel real, grounded experiences.
Right.
Yet, at the exact same time they are logging off, our highest level scientists and venture capitalists are uploading the complete synaptic connectomes of biological fruit flies into servers and wiring living human neurons into silicon chips.
They are taking the biological physical world and violently forcing it into the digital realm.
So here's the thought. If humanity's ultimate long-term trajectory is to seek refuge back in the physical, tangible, muddy world to escape the exhaustion of our screens, while simultaneously our absolute highest scientific trajectory is to upload living consciousness into the digital ether, are we simply trading places?
As we eventually seek out the quiet of the physical world, will our autonomous AI creations and uploaded biological connectomes become the new sole inhabitants of the digital utopia we built, perfected, and ultimately abandoned?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Manal Mehta dossier. Keep questioning your underlying assumptions, keep looking for the second-order effects, and above all, keep seeking the signal in the noise.